July 22nd, 1991. A Milwaukee police cruiser pulls up. Outside a rundown apartment building, a man stands on the sidewalk in handcuffs he put on himself, dangling from one wrist, half open. Beside him, a shaken young man in a bathrobe, barely able to speak. The officers almost drove away. The man in handcuffs was calm, polite, convincing. He said it was a lover's spat, nothing more. They almost believed him. Beat, music sting low and slow. If they had believed him, they would have handed a terrified victim back to the man who drugged him and walked away from an apartment that held one of the most disturbing discoveries in American criminal history. Title card: The Silent Neighbor, Part 1, The Man in 2113. Segment 1, Background, 045-2 Dows. Apartment 213 at the Oxford Apartments looked like nothing. A modest one-bedroom in a rough part of Milwaukee. The man who lived there was quiet, forgettable, the kind of neighbor people struggled to describe when asked. He worked a late shift at a chocolate factory. He kept to himself. Some neighbors complained occasionally about a smell. He always had an explanation. A freezer that broke. Spoiled meat. For years, that was enough. He'd already served time once, years earlier, for molesting a boy, a conviction that should have kept authorities watching him closely. It didn't. He walked free, moved into the Oxford Apartments, and started again. Segment 2, The Escape, 2, just 3:15. The young man in the bathrobe that July night had a name, Tracy Edwards. He'd met the apartment's tenant at a shopping mall hours earlier. The man was friendly, offered money to pose for photos. Edwards, needing cash, agreed to come back to the apartment for a drink. What followed, Edwards would later describe as the most terrifying hours of his life. A drugged drink, a pair of handcuffs, a knife held to his chest while the man spoke calmly about listening to his heartbeat. Edwards realized with total clarity that talking his way out was his only option. He waited. He watched for an opening. And when the man turned his back, Edwards struck him hard and ran. One handcuff still locked around his wrist. Straight into the street, straight into a passing police car. Beat. Silence, then a single low tone. The officers almost let it go as a domestic dispute. Then one of them walked into apartment 213 to check the story. Segment 3, What They Found, 3:15-4:45. Inside, the smell Tracy Edwards had tried to describe hit them immediately. A Polaroid camera sat out. The officer flipped through photos on the counter. Not the kind anyone was prepared for. Then came the refrigerator. Then the freezer.
Not the kind anyone was prepared for. Then came the refrigerator. Then the freezer. Then drawer by drawer, room by room. A scene investigators would later say was unlike anything Milwaukee PD had processed before. Human remains, preserved in various states, some kept, deliberately as if the man living there had wanted to hold on to pieces of the people he'd killed. Skulls, photographs, documenting each stage of what he'd done. Arranged almost like a private archive. The man was arrested on the spot. He didn't resist. He didn't deny it. In fact, once questioning began, he seemed almost relieved to finally talk. His name was Jeffrey Dahmer. Segment 4, The Hook, 4:45-6. Over the following days, Dahmer confessed to killing 17 young men over a 13-year period, the first in 1978, when he was still a teenager. He described calmly and in detail how he'd lured each victim, what he'd done, and why. Investigators who'd handled violent crime for decades left interview rooms, visibly shaken. But the most disturbing part of the case wasn't just what Dahmer had done alone in that apartment. It was how many times the system had looked directly at him. A neighbor's complaint, a police welfare check, even one victim who briefly escaped, naked and bleeding, into the street and let him walk back inside again and again before anyone stopped him. End Part 1 tease. Next time, the confession that shocked even hardened investigators. The 12-year-old boy police returned to Dahmer's custody by mistake, and the question that haunted Milwaukee for years afterward. How does a city miss this many warnings? Wait for Part 2.